And for all in the course of time, new challenges came up. Some of the old problems had never been fully resolved as democratic experiment unfolded. People from different regions began to express their aspirations for autonomy. Sometimes these aspirations were expressed outside the framework of the Indian Union. These involved long struggles and often aggressive and armed assertions by the people. This new challenge came to the fore in the 1980s as the Janta experiment came to an end and there was some political stability at the center. This decade will be remembered for some major conflicts and accords in the various regions of the country, especially in Assam, the Punjab, Mizoram, and the developments in Jammu and Kashmir. In this chapter, we study these cases so as to ask some general questions. Which factors contribute to the tensions arising out of the regional aspirations? How has the Indian responded to these tensions and challenges? What kind of difficulties are faced in balancing democratic rights and national unity? What are the lessons here for achieving unity with diversity in a democracy? Regional aspirations are usually expressed in the language of the region and addressed to the local population or the rulers. And this unusual poster from the Uttarakhand movement appeals to all the Indian citizens in 7 different languages and thus underscores the compatibility of the regional aspirations with the nationalist sentiments. So there are so many things related to the Uttarakhand वाला newspaper. ठीक है, वहाँ पे बहुत सारी चीज़ें लिखी हुई हैं. We seek support of every Indian against injustice, exploitation, and oppression for the ऑपरेशन ऑफ उत्तराखंड स्टेट. हमें हर भारतवासी का सहयोग चाहिए अन्याय शोषण व दमन के खिलाफ उत्तराखंड राज्य के निर्माण के लिए. देर आर सो मेनी थिंग्स एंड लैंग्वेजेस यू कैन सी. यहाँ पे हिंदी था और इंग्लिश था तो वो समझ में आ गया, बाकी जो उत्तराखंड की लैंग्वेज है वो नहीं समझ में आ रही है. तो यहाँ पे अब हम बात करते हैं इस चैप्टर की रीजनल एस्पिरेशंस की, region and the nation की. 1980s may be seen as a period of rising regional aspirations for autonomy. Often outside the framework of Indian Union, these movements frequently involved armed assertions by the people, their repression by the government, and the collapse of the political and electoral processes. It is also not surprising that most of these struggles were long drawn and concluded in negotiated settlements or accords between the central government and the groups leading the movement for the autonomy. And the accords were reached after a process of dialogue that aimed to settle contentious issues within the constitutional framework. Yet the journey to the accord was always tumultuous and often violent. Indian approach in studying the Indian constitution and the process of nation building, we have repeatedly come across one basic principle of the Indian approach to diversity. The Indian nation shall not deny the rights of different regions and linguistic groups to retain their own culture. We decided to live a united social life without losing the distinctiveness of the numerous cultures that constituted it. Indian nationalism sought to balance the principles of unity and diversity, and the nation would not mean the negation of the region. In this sense, the Indian approach was very different from the one adopted in many European countries where they saw cultural diversity as a threat to the nation. Does it mean that regionalism is not as dangerous as communalism, or maybe not dangerous at all? Here, India adopted a democratic approach to the question of diversity. Democracy allows the political expression of regional aspirations and does not look upon them as anti national. Besides, democratic politics allows parties and groups to address the people on the basis of their regional identity, aspiration, and specific regional problem. Thus, in the course of democratic politics, regional aspirations get strengthened. At the same time, democratic politics also means that regional issues and problems will receive adequate attention and accommodation in the policy making process. Such an arrangement may sometimes lead to the tensions and problems. Sometimes the concern for the national unity may overshadow the regional needs and aspirations. At the other times, the concern for the region alone may blind us to the large needs of the nation. Therefore, political conflicts over issues of powers of the regions, their rights, and their separate existence are common to the nations that want to respect diversity while trying to forge and retain unity. Areas of tension की बात करें, so in the first chapter you have seen how immediately after independence our nation had to cope with many difficult issues like partition हुआ, displacement हुआ, integration of princely states किया, reorganization of states and so on, और भी कुछ बहुत सारी problems थी like development से related. Many observers both within the country and from outside had predicted that India as one unified country cannot last long. सभी ने ये predict करा. Soon after independence the issue of Jammu and Kashmir came up. It was not only a conflict between India and Pakistan. More than that, it was a question of the political aspirations of the people of Kashmir Valley. Similarly, in some parts of the northeast, there was no consensus about being a part of India. First, Nagaland and then Mizoram witnessed strong movements demanding separation from the India. In the south, some groups from the Dravid movement briefly toyed with the idea of a separate country. These events were followed by the mass agitations in many parts for the formation of linguistic states. Today's Andhra Pradesh, Karnataka, Maharashtra, and Gujarat were among the regions affected by these agitations. In some parts of the southern India, particularly Tamil Nadu, there were protests against making Hindi the official national language of the country. In the north, there were strong pro Hindi agitations demanding that Hindi be made the official language immediately. From the late 1950s, people speaking the Punjabi language started agitating for a separate state for themselves. This demand was finally accepted, and the states of Punjab and Haryana were created in 1966. Later, the states of Chhattisgarh, Uttarakhand, and Jharkhand were created. Thus, the challenge of diversity was met by the redrawing the internal boundaries of the country. Yet, this did not lead to resolution of all the problems and for all the times. In some regions like Kashmir and Nagaland, the challenge was so complex that it could not be resolved in the first phase of nation building. Besides, new challenges came up in the states like Punjab, Assam, and Mizoram. Let us study these cases in some detail. In this process, let us also go back to some of the earlier instances of difficulties of nation building. The successes and failures in these cases are instructive not merely for a study of our past but also for an understanding of India's future. Why does the challenge always come from the border states? Now, next is here Jammu and Kashmir. Union territories of Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh is shown here. So, Jammu and Kashmir. As you have studied in the previous year, Jammu and Kashmir had a special status under Article 370 of the Indian Constitution. However, in spite of it, Jammu and Kashmir experienced violence, cross border terrorism, and political instability with internal and external ramifications. It also resulted in the loss of many lives, including that of innocent civilians, security personnel, and militants. Besides, there was also a large-scale displacement of the Kashmiri Pandits from the Kashmir Valley. Jammu and Kashmir comprises three social and political regions, Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh. And the Jammu region is a mix of foothills and plains. It is predominantly inhabited by the Hindus, Muslims, Sikhs, and people of other denominations also reside in this region. And the Kashmir region mainly comprises of the Kashmir Valley. It is inhabited mostly by the Kashmiri Muslims, with the remaining being Hindus, Sikhs, Buddhists, and others. And the Ladakh region is mainly mountainous. It has very little population, which is almost equally divided between the Buddhists and Muslims. Roots of the problem. Before 1947, Jammu and Kashmir was a princely state, and its ruler Maharaja Hari Singh did not want to merge either with the India or Pakistan, but to have an independent status for his state. And the Pakistani leaders thought that Kashmir region belonged to Pakistan, since the majority population of the state was Muslim, but this is not how the people of the state themselves saw it. They thought of themselves as Kashmiris above all, and this issue of regional aspirations is known as Kashmiriyat. And the popular movement in the state, led by Sheikh Abdullah of the National Conference, wanted to get rid of Maharaja but was against joining Pakistan. The National Conference was secular organization and had a long association with the Congress, and Sheikh Abdullah was a personal friend of some of the leading nationalist leaders including Nehru. And then उसके बाद जो next है ये क्या है, E.V. Ramaswamy Nayyakar 1879 to 1973, known as Periyar, and the respected strong supporter of the atheism, famous for his anti-caste struggle and rediscovery of Dravidian identity. Initially a worker of the Congress party, started the self-respect movement in 1925, led the anti-Brahmin movement, worked for the Justice Party, and later founded Dravidar Kazhagam, opposed to Hindi and domination of North India, propounded the thesis that North Indian and Brahmins are Aryans. Here Dravidian movement, Vadaku and Vazigiaradhu, Theraku and Therkadhu. The north thrives even as the south decays. This popular slogan sums up the dominant sentiments of one of the India's most effective regional movements, the Dravidian movement, at one point of time, and this was one of the first regional movements in Indian politics. Though some sections of this movement had ambitions of creating a Dravida nation, and the movement did not take to arms, it used democratic means like public debates and the electoral platforms to achieve its ends. And this strategy paid off as the movement acquired political power in the state and also became influential at the national level. And the Dravidian movement led to the formation of Dravidar Kazagam DK under the leadership of Tamil social reformer E.V. Ramaswamy Periyar, and the organization strongly opposed the Brahmins' dominance and affirmed regional pride against the political, economic, and cultural domination of the north. Initially, the Dravidian movement spoke in terms of the whole of the South India. However, lack of support from the other states limited the movement to the Tamil Nadu, and the DK split and the political legacy of the movement was transformed to the Dravida Munnetra Kazhagam DMK, and the DMK made its entry into politics with the three-pronged agitations in 1953 to 1954. First, it demanded the restoration of the original name of Kalakudi railway station, which had been renamed Dalmiapuram after an industrial house from the north, and this demand brought outright opposition to the North Indian economic and cultural symbols. And the second agitation was for giving Tamil cultural history greater importance in the school curriculum. And the third agitation was against the craft education scheme of the state government, which it alleged was linked to the Brahminical social outlook. It also agitated against making Hindi the country's official language, and the success of the anti-Hindi agitations of 1965 added to the DMK's popularity. Sustained political agitations brought the DMK to power in the assembly elections of 1967. Since then, the Dravidian parties have dominated the policies of Tamil Nadu, though the DMK split after the death of its leader C. Annadure, and the influence of the Dravidian parties in Tamil politics actually increased after the split. There were two parties, the DMK and the All India Anna DMK AIADMK, that claimed Dravidian legacy. Both these parties have dominated politics in Tamil Nadu for the last 4 decades. Since 1996, one of these parties has been a part of the ruling coalitions of the center. In the 1990s, many other parties have emerged, and these include Maru Malarchi, Dravida Munitra Kazhagam, MDMK, Patali Makkal Kachi, PMK, and Desia Murpoko, Dravidar Kajhagam, DMDK. All these parties have kept alive the issue of regional pride in the politics of Tamil Nadu. Initially seen as a threat to the Indian nationalism, regional politics in Tamil Nadu is a good example of the compatibility of regionalism and nationalism. उसके बाद जो नेक्स्ट है वो क्या है, ये शेख मोहम्मद अब्दुल्ला 1905 to 1982, leader of Jammu and Kashmir, proponent of autonomy and secularism for the Jammu and Kashmir, led the popular struggle against the princely rule, opposed to the Pakistan due to its non-secular character, and leader of the National Conference, Prime Minister of Jammu and Kashmir, immediately after its succession with the India in 1947, dismissed and jailed by Government of India from 1953 to 1964, and again from 1965 to 1968 became the chief minister of the state after an agreement with Indira Gandhi in 1974. In October 1947, Pakistan sent tribal infiltrators from its side to capture Kashmir, and this forced the Maharaja to ask for the Indian military help. India extended the military support and drove back the infiltrators from Kashmir Valley, but only after the Maharaja had signed an instrument of accession with the government of India. However, as Pakistan continued to control a sizable part of the state, the issue was taken to the United Nations Organization, which in its resolution dated 21 April 1948 recommended a three-step process to resolve the issue. Firstly, Pakistan had to withdraw its entire nationalities who entered into Kashmir. Secondly, India needed to progressively reduce its forces so as to maintain law and order. Thirdly, a plebiscite was to be conducted in a free and impartial manner. However, no progress could be achieved under this resolution. In the meanwhile, Sheikh Abdullah took over as the Prime Minister of the state of Jammu and Kashmir in March 1948, and while India agreed to grant its provisional autonomy under the Article 370, the head of the government in the state was then called Prime Minister. Now here you can see this is shown Roja, Tamil film depicting the travails of Roja, a newly wed and doting wife when her husband Rishi is abducted by the militants. Rishi is a cryptologist who is assigned duty in Kashmir to decode the enemy's messages as love blossoms between the husband and the wife. The husband is kidnapped and the kidnappers demand that their jailed leader be set free in exchange of Rishi. Rosa's world is shattered and she is seen knocking at the doors of officials and politicians. Since the film has the background of the Indo Pakistan dispute, it made instant appeal. The film was dubbed in Hindi and many other Indian languages. Year 1992 इसके डायरेक्टर थे मैनी रत्नम, स्क्रीन प्ले था मैनी रत्नम एंड कास्ट हिंदी वर्जन मधु अरविंद स्वामी, पंकज कपूर एंड जनगराज. ये सारी चीज़ें दी गई थी इस मूवी में. उसके बाद जो नेक्स्ट है वो क्या है, एक्सटर्नल एंड इंटरनल डिस्प्यूट्स. एक्सटर्नल एंड इंटरनल डिस्प्यूट्स की अगर हम बात करें, सो सिंस देन द पॉलिटिक्स ऑफ जम्मू एंड कश्मीर रिमेन्ड controversial and conflict ridden both for the external and internal reasons. Externally, Pakistan has always claimed that Kashmir Valley should be part of the Pakistan. As we noted above, Pakistan sponsored a tribal invasion of the state in 1947, as a consequence of which one part of the state came under Pakistani control. India claims that this area is under illegal occupation. Pakistan describes this area as Azad Pakistan. Ever since 1947, Kashmir has remained a major issue of conflict between India and Pakistan. Internally, there is a dispute about the status of Kashmir within Indian Union. You have studied about the special provisions under Article 370 and 371. Last year in Indian Constitution at work, this special status had provoked two opposite reactions, and there is a section of the people outside of Jammu and Kashmir that believed the special status of the state conferred by the Article 370 did not allow full integration of the state with India. This section felt that Article 370 be revoked and Jammu and Kashmir be treated like any other state of India. Another section, mostly Kashmiris, believe that the autonomy conferred by the Article 370 is not enough. They had at least three major grievances. First, the promise that accession would be referred to the people of the state after the situation created by tribal invasion was normalized has not been fulfilled, and this generated the demand for a plebiscite. Secondly, there was a feeling that the special federal status guaranteed by Article 370 had been eroded in the practice, and this had led to the demand for the restoration of the autonomy or greater state autonomy. Thirdly, it was felt that democracy, which is practiced in the rest of India, has not been similarly institutionalized in the state of Jammu and Kashmir. उसके बाद जो next है वो क्या है, politics since 1948. After taking over as the Prime Minister, Sheikh Abdullah initiated major land reforms and other policies which benefited ordinary people. But there was a growing difference between him and the central government. And about the position of the Kashmir status, he was dismissed in 1953 and kept in detention for a number of years. And the leadership that succeeded him did not enjoy as much popular support and was not able to rule the state mainly due to the support of the center. And there were serious allegations of malpractices and rigging in various elections. During most of the period between 1953 and 1974, the Congress party exercised influence on the politics of the state. Truncated National Conference minus Sheikh Abdullah remained in the power with the active support of the Congress for some time, but later it merged with the Congress, and thus the Congress gained direct control over the government in the state and brought about the changes. In the meanwhile, there were several attempts to reach an agreement between the Sheikh Abdullah and the government of India. A change in the provision of the Constitution of Jammu and Kashmir was made in 1965, by which the Prime Minister of the state was designated as Chief Minister of the state. Accordingly, Ghulam Muhammad Sadiq of the Indian National Congress became the first chief of the state. And now, here in 1974, Indira Gandhi reached an agreement with the Sheikh Abdullah and he became the chief minister of the state. He revived the National Conference, which was elected with the majority in the assembly elections held in 1977. Sheikh Abdullah died in 1982 and the leadership of the National Conference went to his son, Farooq Abdullah, who became the chief minister, but he soon was dismissed by the governor and a breakaway faction of the National Conference came to power for a brief period. The dismissal of Farooq Abdullah government due to the intervention of the center generated a feeling of resentment in the Kashmir, and the confidence that Kashmiris had developed in the democratic processes after the accord between the Indira Gandhi and Sheikh Abdullah received a setback, and the feelings that the center was intervening in the politics of the state was further strengthened when the National Conference in 1986 agreed to have an electoral alliance with the Congress and the ruling party of the center. Now, insurgency and after. It was in this environment that the 1987 Assembly election took place. The official results showed a massive victory of the National Conference, Congress alliance, and Farooq Abdullah returned as chief minister, but it was widely believed that the results did not reflect popular choice and that the entire election process was rigged. A popular resentment had already been brewing in the state against the inefficient administration since early 1980s, and this was now augmented by the commonly prevailing feelings that democratic processes were being undermined by the state at the behest of the center, and this generated a political crisis in Kashmir, which became severe with the rise of insurgency. By 1989, the state had come in the grip of militant movements mobilized around the cause of a separate Kashmiri nation, and the insurgent got moral, material, and military support from the Pakistan. For a number of years, the state was under president's rule and effectively under the control of the armed forces. Throughout the period from 1990, Jammu and Kashmir experienced extraordinary violence at the hands of the insurgents and through army action. Assembly elections in the state were held only in 1996, in which the National Conference led by the Farooq Abdullah came to power with the demand for the regional autonomy for the Jammu and Kashmir. At the end of its term, elections were held in the state in 2002. The National Conference um, failed to win a majority and was replaced by a coalition government of the People's Democratic Party, that is PDP, that is what People's Democratic Party, and Congress. Now 2002 and beyond. As per the coalition agreement, Mufti Muhammad headed the government for the first 3 years, succeeded by Ghulam Nabi Azad of the Indian National Congress, who, however, could not complete the terms as president. Rule was imposed in the state in July 2008, and the next election was held in November-December 2008. Another coalition government composed of NC and INC came into power, headed by Omar Abdullah in 2009. However, the state continued to witness disturbances led by the Hurriyat Conference in 2014, and the state went into another election which recorded the highest voters turnout in 25 years. Consequently, a coalition government led by the Mufti Muhammad Saeed of the PDP came into power with the BJP as its partner. After Mufti Muhammad Saeed died, his daughter Mahbuba Mufti became the first woman chief minister of the state in April 2016. During the tenure of the Mahbuba Mufti, major acts of terrorism, mounting external and internal tensions were witnessed, and the president's rule was imposed in June 2018. After BJP withdrew its support to the Mufti government on 5 August 2019, Article 370 was abolished by the Jammu and Kashmir and Reorganization Act 2019, and the state was constituted into two union territories, visualizing Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh. Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh are living examples of plural society in India. Not only are there diversities of all kinds, religious, cultural, linguistic, ethnic, and tribal, but there are also divergent political and development aspirations which have been sought to be achieved by the latest act. Now let's talk about the Punjab. So here you can see one question is here. This is all about governments, officials, leaders, terrorists, but what about the people in Jammu and Kashmir? In a democracy, we must go by what they want, shouldn't we? उसके बाद नेक्स्ट है मास्टर तारा सिंह 1885 to 1967, prominent Sikh religious and political leader, one of the early leaders of the Shiromani Gurudwara Prabandhak Committee SGPC, leader of the Akali movement, supporter of the freedom movement, but opposed to Congress policy of negotiating only with the Muslims after independence. He was the senior most advocate of the formation of separate Punjab state. नेक्स्ट जो है वो है पंजाब. The decade of 1980s also witnessed major developments in the state of Punjab, and the social composition of the state changed first with the partition and later on after the carving out of Haryana and Himachal Pradesh. While the rest of the country was reorganized on the linguistic lines in 1950s, Punjab had to wait till 1966 for the creation of the Punjabi speaking state and the Akali Dal, which was formed in 1920s as the political wing of the Sikhs, had led the movement for the formation of a Punjabi Suba, and the Sikhs were now a majority in the truncated state of Punjab. Political context में क्या है? After the reorganization, the Akalis came to power in 1967, and then in 1977, on both the occasions, it was a coalition government. And the Akalis discovered that despite the redrawing of the boundaries, their political position remained precarious. Precarious. Firstly, their government was dismissed by the center midway through its term. Secondly, they did not enjoy strong support among the Hindus. And thirdly, the Sikh community, like all other religious communities, was internally differentiated on the caste and class lines, and the Congress got more support among the Dalits, whether Hindu or Sikh, than the Akalis. उसके बाद जो नेक्स्ट वो क्या है? It was in this context that during the 1970s a section of Akalis began to demand political autonomy for the region, and this was reflected in a resolution passed at their conference at Anandpur Sahib in 1973. And the Anandpur Sahib resolution asserted regional autonomy and wanted to redefine center-state relationship in the country. And the resolution also spoke of the aspirations of the Sikh community or nation, and declared its goal as attaining the Bolbala dominance or hegemony of the Sikhs. And the resolution was a plea for strengthening federalism in India. The resolution had a limited appeal among the Sikh masses. Few years later, after the Akali government had been dismissed in 1980, and the Akali then launched a movement on the question of the distribution of water between the Punjab and its neighboring states. A section of the religious leaders raised the question of autonomous Sikh identity. Here you can see Sant Harchand Singh Longowal, 1932 to 1985, Sikh political and religious leader, began his political career in mid-60s as a Akali leader, became president of Akali Dal in 1980, raised an agreement with Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi on the key demands of Akalis, assassinated by the unidentified Sikh youth. Now here you can see the cycle of violence. Should we discuss it, or it was in the context of this during the 1970s? A section of Akalis began to demand political autonomy for the region, and this was reflected in a resolution passed at the conference. The resolution had a limited appeal among the Sikh masses. A few years later, after the Akali government had been dismissed in 1980s, the Akali then launched a movement on the question of this distribution of water between Punjab and its neighboring states. A section of the religious leaders let's discuss about the cycle of violence. So soon the leadership of the movement passed from the moderate Akalis to the extremist elements and took the form of the armed insurgency. These militants made their headquarters inside the Sikh holy shrine, the Golden Temple in Amritsar, and turned it into an armed fortress in June 1984, and the Government of India carried out Operation Blue Star, code name for the army action in the Golden Temple. In this operation, the government could successfully flush out the militants, but it also damaged the historic temple and deeply hurt the sentiments of the Sikhs. A large proportion of the Sikhs in India and abroad saw the military operation as an attack on their faith, and this gave further impetus to the militant and extremist groups. Still, more tragic turn of events complicated the Punjab problem further. Prime Minister Indira Gandhi was assassinated on the 31st October 1984 outside her residence by her bodyguards. Both the assassins were Sikhs and wanted to take revenge for the Operation Blue Star. While the entire country was shocked by this development in the Delhi and in many parts of the northern India, violence broke out against the Sikh community, and the violence against the Sikh continued for almost a week. More than 2006 were killed in the national capital. In the national capital means in Delhi. And the area worst affected by this violence, hundreds of Sikhs were killed in other parts of country, especially in the places like Kanpur, Bokaro, and Charles. Many Sikh families lost their male members and thus suffered great emotional and heavy financial loss. What hurt the Sikh most was that the government took a long time in restoring the normalcy and that the perpetrators of this violence were not effectively punished. 20 years later, speaking in the parliament in 2005, Prime Minister Manmohan Singh expressed regret over these killings and apologized to the nation for the anti Sikh violence. Now, there is also evidence to show that on 31st October 1984, either meetings were held or persons who could organize attacks were contacted and were given instructions to kill Sikhs and loot their houses and shops. The attacks were made in a systematic manner and without much fear of the police, almost suggesting that they were assured that they would not be harmed while committing these acts or even after. Justice Nanavati Commission of Inquiry Report इसमें दिया गया था ये क्या दिखाया गया है यहाँ पे दिखाया गया है वुमेन लुकिंग एट अ वॉल पेंटिंग डिपिक्टिंग इंदिरा गांधी असैसिनेशन उसके बाद जो नेक्स्ट है वो क्या है यहाँ पे द टाइम्स ऑफ इंडिया ब्रॉट आउट a special midday edition on the day Indira Gandhi was assassinated. I have no hesitation in apologizing not only to the Sikh community but the whole Indian nation because what took place in 1984 is the negation of the concept of nationhood and what is enshrined in our constitution. So I am not standing or any false prestige on the behalf of government, on behalf of the entire people of this country. I bow my head in shame that such thing took place. But sir, there are tides in the affairs of nations, and the past is with us. We cannot rewrite the past. जो चीज़ हो गई वो तो हो गई. But as human beings, we have the willpower and we have the ability to write better future for all of us. है ना? Prime Minister Dr. Manmohan Singh intervening in Rajya Sabha debate on 11 August 2005. ये बात उन्होंने बोली थी. Let's talk about the road to peace. After coming to power following the election in 1984, the new Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi initiated a dialogue with the moderate Akali leaders in July 1985. He reached an agreement with the Harchand Singh Longowal, then the president of the Akali Dal, and this agreement, known as the Rajiv Gandhi Longowal Accord or the Punjab Accord, was a step towards bringing normalcy to the Punjab. It was agreed that Chandigarh would be transferred to Punjab. A separate commission would be appointed to resolve this border dispute between Punjab and Haryana, and a tribunal would be set up to decide the sharing of Ravi Beas river water among the Punjab and Haryana and Rajasthan. And the agreement also provided for the compensation to and better treatment of those affected by the militancy in the Punjab and the withdrawal of the applications of Armed Forces Special Powers Act in the Punjab. However, peace did not come easily or immediately. The cycle of violence continued nearly for a decade. Militancy and counter-insurgency violence led to the excesses by the police and violations of the human rights. Politically, it led to the fragmentation of the Akali Dal and the central government had to impose president's rule in the state and the normal electoral and political process was suspended. It was not easy to restore the political process in the atmosphere of suspicion and violence. When elections were held in the Punjab in 1992, only 24% of the electors tuned out to vote. Militancy was eventually eradicated by the security forces, but the losses incurred by the people of Punjab, Sikhs and Hindus alike were enormous. Peace returned to the Punjab by the middle of 1990s and the alliance of Akali Dal, Badal and the BJP scored a major victory in 1997. In the first normal elections in the state in the post-militancy era, the state is once again preoccupied with the questions of economic development and social change. Though religious identities continue to be important for the people, politics has gradually moved back along the secular lines. Now let's talk about the next. This is the northeast. Here illustration is given of the northeast India. यहाँ पे सेवन सिस्टर्स जो है वो दिए गए हैं। एंड देन उसके बाद जो नेक्स्ट है यहाँ पे नॉर्थ ईस्ट की बात की गई है। ये नॉर्थ, ये साउथ, ये ईस्ट, ये वेस्ट, नॉर्थ ईस्ट की बात की गई है। द नॉर्थ ईस्ट, इन द नॉर्थ ईस्ट रीजनल एस्पिरेशंस reached a turning point in the 1980s, and this region now consists of seven states, also referred to as the Seven Sisters. And the region has only 4% of the country's population, but about twice as much share of its area. A small corridor of about 22 kilometers connects the regions to the rest of the country. Otherwise, the region shares boundaries with China, Myanmar, and Bangladesh, and serves as India's gateway to the Southeast Asia. And the region has witnessed a lot of change since 1947. Tripura, Manipur, and Khasi Hills of Meghalaya were erstwhile princely states which merged with India after independence, and the entire region of the northeast has undergone considerable political reorganization. Nagaland state was created in 1963, Manipur, Tripura, and Meghalaya in 1972, while Mizoram and Arunachal Pradesh became separate states only in 1987. The partition of India in 1947 had reduced the northeast to a landlocked region and affected its economy, cut off from the rest of India, and the region suffered neglect in developmental terms. Its politics too remained insulated. At the same time, most states in this region underwent major demographic changes due to influx of migrants from the neighboring states and countries. And the isolation of this region, its complex social character, and its backwardness compared to the other parts of the country have all resulted in the complicated set of demands from different states of the Northeast. And the vast international border and weak communication between the Northeast and the rest of India have further added to the delicate nature of politics there. Three issues dominate the politics of Northeast: demands for the autonomy, movements for the succession, and position to the outsiders. Major initiatives on the first issue in the 1970s set the stage for the some dramatic developments on the second, and the third in the 1980s. Now, demands for the autonomy. At the independence, the entire region except Manipur and Tripura comprised the state of Assam, and demands for the political autonomy arose when the non Assamese felt that the Assam government was imposing Assamese language on them, and there were opposition and protests raised throughout the state. The leaders of the major tribal communities wanted to separate from the Assam, and they formed the Eastern India Tribal Union, which later transformed into a more comprehensive all party Hill Leaders Conference in 1960. And they demanded a tribal state to be carved out of the Assam. Finally, instead of one tribal state, several states got carved out of Assam. At different points of time, the central government had to create Meghalaya, Mizoram, and Arunachal Pradesh out of Assam. Tripura and Manipur were upgraded into states too. The reorganization of the Northeast was completed by 1972, but this was not the end of the autonomy demands in this region. In Assam, for example, communities like the Bodos, Karbis, and Dismasas wanted separate states, and they worked for this demand by the mobilizing public opinion and popular movements as well as through the insurgency. Often, the same area was claimed by more than one community. It was not possible to go on making smaller and yet smaller states, and therefore some other provisions of our federal setup were used to satisfy their autonomy demands. While remaining in Assam, Karbis and Dimasas have been granted autonomy under the districts councils, while Bodos were recently granted autonomous council. Now, next is secessionist movement. So, demands for autonomy were easier to respond to, for these involved using the various provisions in the constitution for the accommodation of the diversities. It was much more difficult when some groups demanded a separate country, not in a momentary anger but consistently as a principled position. And the country's leadership faced this problem for a very long time in at least two states in the Northeast. A comparison of these two cases offers us a lesson in democratic politics. After independence, the Mizo Hills area was made an autonomous district within the Assam. Some Mizos believed that they were never a part of British India and therefore did not belong to the Indian Union. But the movement for the secession gained popular support after the Assam government failed to respond adequately to the Great Famine of 1959 in the Mizo Hills. The Mizos' anger led to the formation of the Mizo National Front (MNF) under the leadership of Lal Denga. In 1966, the MNF started an armed campaign for independence. Thus started a two-decade-long battle between Mizo insurgents and the Indian Army. And the MNF fought guerrilla war, got support from Pakistani government, and secured shelter in the then East Pakistan. The Indian security forces countered it with the series of repressive measures of which the common people were with the victims. Even air force was used. These measures caused more anger and alienation among the people. At the end of 2 decades of insurgency, everyone was a loser. This is where maturity of the political leadership at both ends made. Here, my friend Chon said that people in Delhi know more about the map of the Europe than about the Northeast in our country. I think she is right, at least about my schoolmates. यहाँ पे लाल डेंगा दिया गया है 1937 to 1990. Founder and leader of the Mizo National Front turned into a rebel after the experience of the famine in 1959, led an armed struggle against India for 2 decades, reached a settlement and signed an agreement with the Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi. In 1986 became the Chief Minister of the newly created state of Mizoram. उसके बाद जो नेक्स्ट है वो क्या है? नेक्स्ट जो है वो ये है, एट द एंड ऑफ द decades of insurgency, everyone was a loser, and this is where maturity of the political leadership at both the ends made a difference. Lal Denga came back from the exile in Pakistan and started negotiations with the Indian government. Rajiv Gandhi steered these negotiations to a positive conclusion. In 1986, a peace agreement was signed between Rajiv Gandhi and Lal Denga. As per this accord, Mizoram was granted full-fledged statehood with special powers, and the MNF agreed to give up the secessionist struggle. Lal Denga took over as the chief minister, and this accord proved a turning point in the history of Mizoram. Today, Mizoram is one of the most peaceful places in the region and has taken big strides in the literacy and development. And the story of Nagaland is similar to the Mizoram, except that it started much earlier and has not yet had such a happy ending. Led by Angami Jafu Fizo, a section of the Nagas declared independence from India way back in 1951. Fizo turned down many offers of negotiated settlements, and the Naga National Council launched an armed struggle for the sovereignty of the Nagas. After a period of violent insurgency, a section of the Nagas signed an agreement with the government of India. Now, here इसमें क्या बात की गई है? The story of the Nagaland is similar to the Mizoram, except that it started much earlier and has not yet had such a happy ending. Led by the Angami Jafu Fizo, a section of the Nagas declared independence from India way back in 1951. Fizo turned down many offers of negotiated settlements, and the Naga National Council launched an armed struggle for the sovereignty of Nagas. After a period of violent insurgency, a section of the Nagas signed an agreement with the government of India. But this was not acceptable to the other rebels, and the problem in Nagaland still awaits a final resolution. उसके बाद जो next है वो क्या है? Movements against outsiders. The large-scale migrations into the northeast gave rise to a special kind of problem that pitted the local communities against people who were seen as the outsiders or migrants. And these latecomers, either from India or abroad, are seen as encroachers or on the scarce resources like land and potential competitors to employment opportunities and political power. And this issue has taken political and sometimes violent form in the many states of the Northeast. The Assam movement from 1979 to 1985 is the best example of such movements against outsiders, and the Assamese suspected that there were huge members of illegal Bengali Muslim settlers from the Bangladesh, and they felt that unless these foreign nationals are detected and deported, they would reduce the indigenous Assamese into a minority. And there were other economic issues too, and there was widespread poverty and unemployment in the Assam. Despite the existence of natural resources like oil, tea, and coal, it was felt that these were drained out of the state without any commensurate benefit to the people. In 1979, the All Assam Students Union (AASU), in 1979, the All Assam Students Union (AASU), a students group not affiliated to any party, led an anti-foreigner movement. The movement was against illegal migrants against domination of the Bengalis, was against illegal migrants, against domination of Bengalis and other outsiders, and against faulty voters registers that included the names of lakhs of immigrants. And the movements and the movement demanded that all outsiders who had entered the state after 1951 should be sent back. And the agitation followed many novel methods and mobilized all sections of Assamese people, drawing support across the state. It also involved many tragic and violent incidents leading to the loss of property and human lives. And the movement also tried to blockade the movement of trains and the supply of oil from Assam to refineries in Bihar. Here, this is Angami Japu Fijo, 1904 to 1990, leader of the movement for the independent Nagaland, president of Naga National Council, began an armed struggle against the Indian state, who went underground, stayed in Pakistan, and spent the last 3 decades of his life in exile in UK. I have never understood this insider outsider business. It's like the train compartment, someone who got in before other streets, other as outsiders. The Assam movements here, movements against the outsiders. The large scale migration into the northeast gave rise to a special kind of problem that pitted the local communities against the people who were seen as outsiders or migrants. And these latecomers, either from India or abroad, are seen as encroachers on scarce resources like land and potential competitors to employment opportunities and political power. And this issue has taken political and sometimes violent form in the many states of the Northeast, and the Assam movement from 1979 to 1985 is the best example of such movements against outsider. And the Assamese suspected that there were huge numbers of illegal Bengali Muslim settlers from Bangladesh, and they felt that unless these foreign nationals are detected and deported, they would reduce the indigenous Assamese into a minority. There were other economic issues too, and there was widespread poverty and unemployment in Assam despite the existence of natural resources like oil, tea, and coal. It was felt that these were drained out of the state without any commensurate benefit to the people. In 1979, the All Assam Students Union (AASU), a students group not affiliated to any party, led an anti-foreigner movement. The movement was against illegal migrations, against domination of Bengalis and other outsiders, and against faulty voters register that included the names of lakhs of immigrants. And the movement demanded that all outsiders who had entered the state after 1951 should be sent back. And the agitations followed many novel methods and mobilized all sections of Assamese people, drawing support across the state. It also involved many tragic and violent incidents leading to a loss of property and human lives. And the movement also tried to blockade the movement of trains and the supply of oil from the Assam to refineries in Bihar. And eventually, after 6 years of turmoil, the Rajiv Gandhi led government entered into negotiations with the ASU leaders, leading to the signing of an accord in 1985. According to this agreement, those foreigners who migrated into Assam during and after Bangladesh war and since were to be identified and deported. With the successful completion of the movement, and the ASU and the Assam Gana Sangram Parishad organized themselves as a regional political party called Assam Gana Parishad (AZP). It came to power in 1985 with the promise of resolving the foreign national problem as well as to build a golden Assam. उसके बाद Assam Accord brought peace and changed the face of politics in Assam, but it did not solve the problem of immigration, and the issue of the outsiders continues to be a live issue in the politics of Assam. उसके बाद जो नेक्स्ट है वो क्या है, नेक्स्ट जो है देर आर सो मेनी थिंग्स, मतलब जो कि असम समझौता के बारे में लिखा हुआ है. अगर हम इसको भी पढ़ें तो अखबार में क्या आया हुआ था, नई दुनिया असम समझौता उल्लेखनीय उपलब्धि. असम के बारे में केंद्र सरकार और असम के छात्र संगठनों के बीच में 15 तारीख को तड़के हुए समझौते से असम का 6 वर्ष पुराना आंदोलन समाप्त हो गया. असम के विभिन्न छात्र संगठनों के द्वारा संचालित सरकार विरोधी आंदोलन के दौरान 3,500 से अधिक जानी गई और अरबों रुपए की आर्थिक हानि हुई. 12 अप्रैल को जब तत्कालीन प्रधानमंत्री श्रीमती इंदिरा गांधी गुवाहाटी गई तो छात्र नेता को इस साल को जो आधार वर्ष मानकर विदेशी नागरिकों की समस्या के समाधान के लिए तैयार हो गए थे. पर प्रधानमंत्री तब जो है इस ईयर को आधार वर्ष पाने जाने पर अड़ी रही. फलस्वरूप सरकार तथा छात्र संगठनों के बीच में बातचीत टूट गई. श्रीमती इंदिरा गांधी ने असम समस्या को सुलझाने के लिए 4 गृह मंत्रियों जेल सिंह, श्री आर वेंकटरमन, श्री प्रकाश चंद्र सेठी और श्री नर सिंह राव को सेवाओं का उपयोग किया. किंतु अविश्वास और कठोर पैतरों का जो वातावरण बना था वह ऐसा नहीं था कि कोई समझौता हो पाता. श्री राजीव गांधी के काम करने की शैली इस अर्थ में नई है कि वह सहज ही विपक्षी दल का विश्वास जीत लेती है। श्री गांधी रियायतें देने को तैयार रहते हैं, जिसके फल स्वरूप सामने वाला पक्ष भी रियायत देकर समझौता करने को तैयार हो जाता है। केंद्र सरकार के गृह सचिव श्री डी प्रधान ने असम के छात्र नेताओं के साथ बुनियादी बातचीत पर सहमति का आधार तैयार किया। गृह मंत्री श्री बी चौहान ने अंतिम दौर में बातचीत में भाग लिया। कुछ रुकावटों के बाद प्रधानमंत्री राजीव गांधी के हस्तक्षेप से छात्रों को समझौते के लिए राजी किया जा सका और 10 सूत्री समझौते पर हस्ताक्षर हो गए। समझौते को देखने से यह स्पष्ट हो जाता है कि बुनियादी मामलों में केंद्र सरकार और छात्र संगठनों आसू और अखिल असम गण संग्राम परिषद के नेताओं दोनों ने एक दूसरे को उल्लेखनीय रियायतें दी। इसलिए यह मानने का कोई आधार नहीं है कि 15 अगस्त का असम समझौता किस पक्ष विशेष की जीत या फिर किसी पक्ष विशेष की हार है। असम समझौता एक महत्वपूर्ण राष्ट्रीय उपलब्धि है, जिसका श्रेय भारत के युवा प्रधानमंत्री श्री राजीव गांधी को जाता है। असम छात्र संगठनों के नेता भी बधाई के पात्र हैं और विवेक और सौहार्द का परिचय देकर ये इन्होंने अपना 6 वर्ष पुराना आंदोलन समाप्त करने को राजी हो गए। प्रधानमंत्री की कीर्ति में असम समझौते में एक बार और जो है चार चांद लगा दिए और अभी जो है जुलाई वगैरह को उन्होंने पंजाब की खतरनाक रूप से जो है दिन बाद अनंत त्रासदी के नाम से पुकारी जाने वाली असम की समस्या का समाधान खोजकर श्री राजीव गांधी ने अपूर्व समाधानकर्ता का विशेषण अर्जित कर लिया। समझौते के अनुसार विदेशी नागरिकों की पहचान करने के लिए इतनी तारीख को जो है वो मतलब आधार वर्ष माना गया और स्थिति के पहले आए विदेशियों को नियम सम्मत मान लिया जाएगा। एक अनुमान के अनुसार जो है इस डेट से इस डेट के बीच लगभग 5 लाख विदेशी पूर्वी जो है वो आए। उसके बाद मतलब बहुत सारी चीज़ें जो है अखबार में आई हुई हैं, ठीक है, इट्स डन। उसके बाद जो नेक्स्ट है वो क्या है, सिक्किम्स मर्जर। यहाँ पे पहले हम पढ़ेंगे इसके बारे में। काजी लैंडाप डोरजी, ये क्या है, लीडर ऑफ काजी लैंडाप डोरजी खांग सरपा 1904, लीडर ऑफ डेमोक्रेसी मूवमेंट इन सिक्किम, फाउंडर ऑफ सिक्किम प्रजा मंडल and later leader of the Sikkim State Congress in 1962, founded the Sikkim National Congress. After an electoral victory, he led the movement for integration of Sikkim with India. After the integration, Sikkim Congress merged with the Indian National Congress. Sikkim's merger. At the time of independence, Sikkim was a protectorate of India. It meant that while it was not a part of India, it was also not a fully sovereign country. Sikkim's defense and foreign relations were looked after by the India, while the power of internal administration was with the Chogyal, Sikkim's monarch, and this arrangement ran into difficulty as the Chogyal was unable to deal with the democratic aspirations of the people. An overwhelming majority of Sikkim's population was Nepali, but the Chogyal was seen as perpetuating the rule of a small elite from the minority Lapcha Bhutia community, and the anti-Chogyal leaders of both the communities sought and got support from the government of India. And the first democratic elections to Sikkim Assembly in 1974 were swept by Sikkim Congress, which stood for the greater integration with the India. The assembly first sought the status of associate state and then in April 1975 passed a resolution asking for the full integration with the India, and this was followed by a hurriedly organized referendum that put a stamp of popular approval and on the assembly request, and the Indian parliament accepted this request immediately and Sikkim became the 22nd state of the Indian Union. And Chogyal did not accept that this merger, and his supporters accused the government of India of foul play and use of force. Yet the merger enjoyed popular support and did not become a divisive issue in the Sikkim's politics. Now, accommodation and national integration. So, these cases have shown us that even after 6 decades of independence, some of the issues of national integration are not fully resolved. We have seen that regional aspirations ranging from demands of statehood and economic developments to autonomy and separation keep coming. And the period since 1980 accentuated these tensions and tested the capacity of democratic politics to accommodate the demands of diverse sections of the society. What lessons can we draw from these examples? First and the most elementary lesson is that regional aspirations are very much a part of democratic politics. Expression of regional issues is not an aberration or an abnormal phenomenon. Even in the smaller countries like the United Kingdom, there are regional aspirations in the Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. Spain faces secessionist movements from the Basques, and so does Sri Lanka from the Tamils. A large and diverse democracy like India must deal with regional aspirations on a regular basis. National building is an ongoing process. उसके बाद जो नेक्स्ट है वो क्या है, राजीव गांधी 1944 to 1991, Prime Minister of India between 1984 and 1989. son of Indira Gandhi, joined active politics after 1980, reached agreements with militants in Punjab, Mizoram, and the Students' Union in Assam, pressed for a more open economy and computer technology, sent Indian Army contingent on the request of Sri Lankan governments to sort out the Sinhala Tamil conflicts, assassinated by suspected LTTE suicide bomber. The second lesson is that the best way to respond to the regional aspirations is through the democratic negotiations rather than through the suppression. Look at the situation in the 80s. Militancy had erupted in Punjab. Problems were persisting in the northeast. Students in Assam were agitating Kashmir Valley was on the boil. Instead of treating these as a simple law and other problems, the government of India reached negotiated settlements with the regional movements, and this produced a reconciliation which reduced the tensions existing in many regions. And the example of Mizoram shows how political settlement can resolve the problem of separatism effectively. The third lesson is about the significance of power sharing. It is not sufficient to have a formal democratic structure. Besides that, groups and parties from the region need to be given share in the power at the state level. Similarly, it is not sufficient to say that the states or the regions have autonomy in their matters. The regions together from the nations, so the regions must have a share in deciding the destiny of the nation. If regions are not given a share in the national level decision making, the feeling of the injustice and alienation can spread. The fourth lesson is that regional imbalance in economic development contributes to the feeling of regional discrimination. Regional imbalance is a fact of India's development experience. Naturally, the backward states or backward regions in some states feel that their backwardness should be addressed on the priority basis, and that the policies of the Indian government have caused this imbalance. If some states remain poor and other development rapidly, it leads to regional imbalances and inter-regional migrations. Finally, these cases make us appreciate the far-sightedness of the makers of our constitution in dealing with the questions of diversity. And the federal system adopted by the India is a flexible arrangement. While most of the states have equal powers, there are special provisions for some states like Jammu and Kashmir and the states in the northeast. And the sixth schedule of the constitution allows different tribes complete autonomy of preserving their practices and customary laws, and these provisions proved crucial in resolving some very complex political problems in the northeast. What distinguishes India from many other countries that face similar challenges is that the constitution framework in India is much more flexible and accommodative, and therefore regional aspirations are not encouraged to espouse separatism. Thus, politics in India has succeeded in accepting regionalism as part and parcel of democratic politics. उसके बाद अब हम बात करेंगे गोवाज लिबरेशन की. किसकी बात करेंगे हम? गोवा लिबरेशन की. तो although the British Empire in India came to an end in 1947, उसके बाद भी Portugal refused to withdraw from the territories of Goa. Diu and Daman, which were under the colonial rule since the 16th century, during their long rule, the Portuguese suppressed the people of Goa, denied them civil rights, and carried out forced religious conversions. After India's independence, the Indian government tried very patiently to persuade the Portuguese government to withdraw, and there was also a strong popular movement within Goa for the freedom, and they were strengthened by socialist satyagrahis from the Maharashtra. Finally, in December 1961, the government of India sent the army which liberated these territories. After barely 2 days of action, Goa, Diu and Daman became union territory. Another complications arose soon, led by the Maharashtravadi Gomantak Party (MGP). One section desired that Goa, as a Marathi-speaking area, should merge with the Maharashtra, and however, many Goans were keen to retain a separate Goan identity and culture, particularly the Konkani language. They were led by the United Goan Party (UCP) in the January 1967. The central government held a special opinion poll in the Goa, asking people to decide if they wanted to be part of Maharashtra or remain separate. A referendum-like procedure was used to ascertain people's wishes on this issue. The majority voted in the favor of remaining outside outside of Maharashtra. Thus, Goa continued as a union territory. Finally, in 1987, Goa became a state of the Indian Union. उसके बाद जो नेक्स्ट है वो क्या है? Finally, this chapter is over. In the next chapter, we will be discussing about the recent developments in Indian politics. Thank you so much for watching and stay connected.